Welcome to our channel. Today I share a true story. It is a story of struggle and hope. It is a story of pain and success. It is the story of a young boy who had nothing. He had no money. He had no home. He had no food. He lost everything when he was very young. He had no one to help him. He faced hunger and loneliness. He met many hardships. But he did not give up. He did not accept his fate. He walked for 2 years. He walked 470 kilometers. He had no money. He had no food. He had no shelter. He faced storms, hunger, and exhaustion. He never stopped. That boy later became the founder of a famous luxury brand. His name is Louis Vuitton. How did he do it? How did a homeless, hungry boy create $1 billion empire? How did he turn his pain into power? How did he turn his struggles into success? Every detail in this story is true. Every struggle and every success is real. Watch the full story to learn how he went from nothing to luxury. You will learn many life lessons and improve your English with this simple story. Now, let us begin at the very start. In 1821, in a small village called Annay in France, a baby boy was born. His name was Louis Vuitton. His family was very poor. His father, Xavier, was a carpenter. He built simple furniture and small wooden structures. His mother, Corongala, was a hat maker. She made hats for local women. They worked hard all day. They earned little money. They barely had enough to buy food. Louis grew up in a tiny wooden house. The roof leaked. The floors were cold and damp. Winters were very hard. Snow covered the village for months. Cold winds made life even harder. There was no heating. There were no warm blankets. There was no comfortable bed. Louis learned early that life was not fair. He did not have toys like rich children. He did not go to school. Instead, he helped his father. He carried heavy wooden planks. He hammered nails. He cleaned up sawdust. His hands were rough. His clothes were torn. His stomach was often empty. Even though he had nothing, Louis had a dream. Every day, travelers passed by his village. They were rich. They wore fine clothes. They carried large trunks and suitcases. Louis watched them with wonder. He asked, "Where are they going? Who made those trunks?" He had never seen the world beyond his small village. His heart was full of curiosity. He wanted to learn more. He wanted a better life. Fate was not kind to him. When Louis was 10, his mother became very sick. There were no hospitals in his village. There were no doctors to help her. Day by day, her condition worsened. One morning, as the sun rose, his mother took her last breath. Louis stood by her grave in silence. He could not cry. His world felt as if it had fallen apart. His father was overwhelmed with grief. He became distant and cold. He could not care for Louis. For the first time, Louis felt completely alone. At that moment, Louis made a decision. He would not stay in his village. He would not live in poverty forever. He would chase his dream. At the age of 13, he had no money, no horse, and no food. Paris, the city of dreams, was 470 kilometers away. It seemed impossible. One evening, Louis packed a small bag. He did not have a map. He did not tell his father. He did not say goodbye. Before sunrise, he took his first step. He began the long journey to Paris. Louis walked for hours, days, and weeks. His feet hurt. His body grew weak. Sometimes kind strangers gave him food. Other times he went to sleep hungry. He slept under trees. He used his bag as a pillow. He crossed forests, climbed mountains, and swam across rivers. He worked as a farm helper in small villages. He earned food for his work. Rain soaked his clothes. Winter winds burned his skin. Yet he never turned back. He was tired and hungry, but he stayed determined. After 2 long years, Louis finally reached Paris. Paris was not like he had imagined. The city was huge. There were thousands of people. Carriages rushed along the streets, markets overflowed with food and luxury goods. The air smelled of fresh bread, roasted coffee, and sweet perfume. Yet there was another side to Paris. The streets were dirty. There were many beggars and thieves. Louis had nothing. He had no home, no family, and no money. He stood at the edge of the city, exhausted. His clothes were torn, his feet bled from the long journey. His stomach rumbled with hunger. For the first time in 2 years, fear filled his heart. That night, Louis found shelter in an empty wooden cart near a bakery. He crawled inside. He pulled his small bag close to his chest. He tried to sleep as the noisy streets echoed around him. People laughed, shouted, and horses clattered on stone roads. Rats searched for food in the dark. Louis closed his eyes and ignored the cold wind. The next morning, hunger forced him to wake up early. He watched well-dressed people enter bakeries. They bought golden loaves of bread and buttery croissants. The smell made his stomach twist with pain. He needed work. Louis went from shop to shop asking for a job. Every time he heard, "No job, no experience, no money." Days passed and Louis grew weaker. He ate scraps from the market. He picked up leftover bread when no one saw him. His body ached. His clothes were dirty. He felt very alone. Yet he did not give up. One evening, as the sun set, Louis saw a man struggling with a heavy wooden trunk. The man was sweating. His hands shook from the weight. Without thinking, Louis ran forward and grabbed the other side of the trunk. The man looked at him in surprise. He did not say much. Together they carried the trunk into a shop. Inside the shop, Louis saw many trunks. They came in different shapes and sizes. Some trunks were covered in leather, others had brass locks and golden initials. This was a workshop. The owner of the shop was named Marechal. He looked at Louis with sharp eyes. He said, "You are strong for a boy. What is your name?" Louis said, "I am Louis Vuitton, sir. I want to work." Marechal asked, "Can you make trunks?" Louis said, "No, sir, but I can learn." Marechal smiled and said, "Give me a chance. Start tomorrow, work hard and learn. We will talk about pay later." Louis bowed and said, "Thank you, sir." He had found his first chance. The next morning, Louis arrived at the workshop before sunrise. The workshop was cold. It smelled of fresh wood and glue. Tools lay on wooden tables. There were hammers, saws, chisels, and needles for stitching leather. At first, Louis swept the floor and fetched tools. He cleaned up after the workers. He was happy to be inside and away from the cold streets. But weeks passed, and he still did only basic work. He wanted to create. He wanted to build. One evening, after everyone had left, Louis stayed behind. He picked up a small wooden panel. He began to practice. He hammered, carved, and stitched. He imitated the work he had seen during the day. The next morning, Marechal noticed his work. He asked, "Did you make this?" Louis nodded and said, "Yes, sir." Marichal said, "From now on, stay after work and I will teach you more." That night, Louis worked harder than ever. He learned how to shape wood perfectly. He learned to choose the best leather. He learned to stitch with precision. Months passed. Louis was no longer just an apprentice. He was becoming a skilled craftsman. His hands grew strong. His designs became creative. Nobles and rich people began to ask for his trunks by name. They said, "I want my trunk made by Vuitton." His reputation spread. One day, a very elegant woman entered the shop. She wore a shiny silk gown and a pearl necklace. Her name was Empress Eugenie. She was the wife of Napoleon III, the ruler of France. She looked around with a keen eye. She asked, "Are you the young craftsman called Vuitton?" Louis answered, "Yes, your Majesty." Then she turned to Marichal and said, "I need a trunk, but not just any trunk. I travel a lot. My current trunk is too heavy and impractical. I want a trunk that is light, elegant, and useful." Louis thought hard. He saw that old trunks were bulky and round. They were made of heavy leather. They were not good for modern travel. Louis said, "Your Majesty, what if I create a trunk that is light? I can make a flat-topped trunk. I will use waterproof canvas instead of heavy leather. It will be durable and easy to carry." There was silence. Empress Eugenie looked at him and said, "That is interesting. Can you do it?" Louis said, "Yes, Your Majesty. I will make a trunk like no other." Louis worked day and night on the new trunk. He chose poplar wood because it was light and strong. He made a flat top so trunks could be stacked neatly. He used a light grey waterproof canvas. He paid attention to every detail. He made smooth edges. He made precise stitches. He added shiny brass locks. When the trunk was finished, it was a masterpiece. The canvas shimmered in the light. The trunk looked elegant and perfect. On the day of the presentation, Louis stood in a grand hall at the Empress's palace. His heart pounded. Nobles and officials watched quietly. Empress Eugenie ran her fingers over the trunk. She looked at the locks and the stitching. Finally, she said, "This is extraordinary." The room filled with soft murmurs. Marichal stared in shock. Then the Empress said, "You will be my personal trunk maker." Louis had won her trust. After that day, orders for Vuitton trunks came from all over Paris. Aristocrats, politicians, and rich travelers all wanted his trunks. But Louis was still an employee in Marichal's shop. He dreamed of working for himself. After many years, he made a bold decision. He left the workshop. He started his own business with the money he had saved. He had about $1,000 in today's value. He rented a small space in Paris. He hung a wooden sign that read, "Louis Vuitton, Malatier Trunk Maker." Now he was a business owner. He worked from sunrise to midnight. Every trunk was made by him alone. There were no employees. He worked hard even when it was lonely. Then a great war broke out in France. It was the Franco-Russian War. The streets of Paris became battlefields. Rich customers left the city, factories closed, businesses collapsed. Suddenly, no one was buying luxury goods. Louis's shop, which had been growing, stood nearly empty. Money stopped coming in. For many months, Louis fought to keep his business alive. He sold some of his tools. He used fewer materials. He worked harder than ever. Then, when all hope seemed lost, the war ended. Peace returned. People wanted to travel again. They wanted luxury and style. Orders flooded back. Louis's shop became popular once more. In 1871, Louis opened a new workshop in a town called Agnières, near Paris. The new workshop was 4 times bigger than his old shop. He hired workers, he trained apprentices, he designed new trunk collections. His dream grew bigger. He was building an empire. As his business grew, Louis married a kind and strong woman named Clemence Emily Pariot. She believed in his dream. They had a son named Georges Vuitton. George later helped expand the business, but success came with hard work. Louis spent many nights in his workshop. He missed family gatherings and quiet evenings. He learned that a lasting brand must sell to rich people. Rich customers set trends. They cared about exclusivity. Louis did not try to sell to everyone. He focused on a few elite clients. They paid top money for his unique, handmade trunks. Soon many people began to copy his designs. Fake Vuitton trunks appeared on the streets of Paris, New York, and Tokyo. To protect his brand, Louis introduced the LV monogram in 1896. This made it harder for counterfeiters to copy his work. Under his son George, the brand did more than survive. It grew and became dominant in the luxury market. Years later, Louis's grandson, Gaston Louis Vuitton, took charge. The world was changing. The Great Depression made life hard for many. Cars and airplanes changed travel. Traditional trunks were not as needed. Gaston knew that the company must adapt. He expanded the product line. He added small leather goods, purses, and accessories. Then World War II came. France was occupied by Nazi Germany. Gaston had to decide whether to close the business or keep it open. He chose to work with the government. This decision was kept secret for many years. After the war, Gaston rebuilt the brand's image. He knew that rich people would always want luxury. By the 1950s, Louis Vuitton was back on top. Famous handbags like the Speedy bag and the Keep All bag became symbols of style. Louis Vuitton was no longer just a travel brand. It had become a fashion icon. In the 1960s, the brand grew into one of the most respected luxury names in the world. New trends emerged. Competition grew. In the 1970s and 1980s, a man named Henri Racamier joined the business. He believed Louis Vuitton could be the most powerful luxury brand ever. Henri expanded the market beyond France. He went to the United States, Japan, and the Middle East. He raised prices so that the products became even more desirable. He changed the shopping experience. Louis Vuitton stores became like palaces. They had private areas, champagne service, and VIP treatment. But fake Vuitton bags began to appear. The company started a big fight against counterfeits. They worked with governments. They added special security features to their products. In 1987, Henri Racamier made a bold move. He merged Louis Vuitton with 2 other luxury brands, Moët and Hennessy. This created LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moët Hennessy. LVMH became the world's largest luxury group. It grew to include fashion, jewelry, cosmetics, and fine alcohol. Then in 1989, a young businessman named Bernard Arnault took full control of LVMH. He used strong business tactics. He expanded into new markets like China, Russia, and India. He bought luxury brands like Dior, Givenchy, and Fendi. Today, LVMH is worth over $500 billion. Bernard Arnault is one of the richest men in the world. Today, owning a Louis Vuitton item is a sign of great prestige. Every product is handmade by the best artisans. A Louis Vuitton handbag, travel trunk, or minibar is a symbol of wealth. Even after more than 170 years, Louis Vuitton is the most powerful luxury brand in the world. This story is a lesson in determination and vision. It shows how a poor village boy with nothing but a dream built a global empire. Louis Vuitton turned his struggle into success. His life teaches us to work hard and never give up. His legacy inspires people all over the world. Thank you for listening. This is the story of Louis Vuitton. It is a story of pain, hope, and great success. May it inspire you to follow your dreams. Never give up, and you too can change your life.